In the beginning, before all things came into being, there was God. And God spoke, and there was light. This is the beginning of the story of God, of creation in the book of Genesis. Today we hear the beginning of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. It is much to ponder. Through the eternal Word, all light and life of creation came into being. It is a dance between stories, a play on the imagination, if you will. These stories of God's presence draw us into seeking the eternal God through God made manifest in the world, Jesus. The poetry of the Gospel of John draws us into pondering the fullness of God the Creator. And through the incarnation, we encounter the eternal God, the Word, the light and life of creation, as the baby Jesus and in all human beings. So I'd like to share a story with you from Megan McKenna's book, Advent, Christmas, and Epiphany. It is the story about revealing light. It is the story of Ahaz, the slave. Once upon a time, there was a poor man who believed in God. This was hard because when he thought about his life, he knew that he was born poor and would, at best, die poor and struggle until his last breath. He was a slave who, covered with mud and bent double, worked in the mines and was near blind from being underground so much. But one day things changed without warning. An officer of the king arrived to find a new attendant for the king. The last attendant had died mysteriously. 10 of the more fit slaves were singled out and taken to the palace. They were fed, clothed, given rest, and cared for, and within a few weeks were presented to the king. They were lined up in a row, and each was given an exquisite glass and told to break it. All obeyed immediately. Then the king went to each in turn and asked him, "Why did you break it?" Their response was simple: "Because you told me to." One after another, they responded in the same way. Now the poor man who believed in God, the man whose name was Ahaz, thought quickly, "I can't answer the same thing. What can I say?" He was the last of the slaves to be questioned, and when the king got to him, he stammered, "Forgive me, please. I am so sorry," and bowed before the king. It was exactly what he was thinking and feeling, and that was what came out. The king looked at him, smiled, and chose him as his new attendant. Ahaz remembered what he had learned: to say and do exactly what he thought and felt, the truth and nothing else, no matter the consequences. The king found that he grew quickly to trust this man from the mines, because there were so few people who ever told him the truth or what they truly were thinking. They always coded it or covered it in what they thought the king wanted to hear, or bent it to serve their own advantage. Ahaz took over more and more duties until Within a number of years, he was counselor to the king in all matters pertaining to the kingdom. And he was also in charge of the king's finances because he was trusted explicitly. More and more power and authority was delegated to Ahaz. Now, when someone rises in power that quickly, others become envious, jealous, and bitter. Ahaz had many enemies and many more who distrusted him and wondered what he did to so enchant the king. They speculated on how he had lodged himself so securely in the king's affections so quickly, for now Ahaz was the king's friend as well. And so the rumors started. When they came to the king's ears, he ignored them. He knew his friend, his servant, well. But they were persistent, and soon his closest advisors and counselors were warning him almost daily. It was always the same. Ahaz was stealing from him, robbing him blind. Couldn't he see it? Why, every day the man waited until everyone had left, then let himself into the king's storeroom. He has a key to the huge inner safe, and he would go in and stay for over an hour, and then come out as if nothing was amiss. But that was where the jewels, the land deeds and contracts, the gifts from other rulers were kept. It would be so easy to take a contract, a deed for land, currency, or jewels, and put them in his volume of sleeves. The talk and dire warning never stopped. And so the king decided to check and see for himself what Ahaz was up to in his daily visitations to his storeroom. Secretly, he had 2 holes drilled at eye level in the wall of the storeroom so that someone could watch what transpired inside. The king took up his position one day after everyone had left for the day. Sure enough, Ahaz went into the safe where the treasures of the kingdom were kept and came out with a carefully folded pile of clothes. They were rags, filthy, smelly, caked with mud and sweat. He placed them on a table along with a candle and a book and some incense. He solemnly took off his robes of state and put on the rags that he had worn. That day he had been removed from the mines and taken to the king's palace so many years ago. Then he lit the candle and incense and began to pray aloud. Lord God, Master of the universe, I stand before you as you have made me. Do not let me forget who I am and that I belong to you alone. For it is you who have blessed me and given me all that I now enjoy. It is you who have entrusted me to the power of this kingdom and the friendship of the king. Do not let me forget who I am and that I am yours, O Holy One, and that I live by your mercy and will. He prayed in this manner, devoutly and intensely, for over an hour. Then he took off the rags of the slave, carefully folded them up again, and put them back into the safe. The candle and incense had burned out, and he dressed again in the robes that were the gift of the king and left the storeroom, locking it behind him. The king met him in the hallway when he left. Ahaz bowed low to the king. The king grasped him by the shoulders and lifted him up, speaking to him, not as a friend, but as king. Ahaz, he began, you never cease to surprise and amaze me, and you have done it again. All my counselors have warned me that you are a common thief and that you have been stealing from behind my back. But But you have managed to do something for me that no one else ever has. You have made me remember who I am. I am a king here on earth, but even I, or especially I, must stand before the Holy One and give account of what I have done and who I am. You have made me remember that before God I am his servant and belong to him alone, and that I have no power here on earth that has not been entrusted to me by God. Do not ever let me forget who I truly am. In this season of Christmas, as we celebrate the inbreaking of God into the world, do you remember who you are and to whom you belong? Who helps you remember? And whom do you help to remember who they truly are? As Christians, we believe we are the beloved children, the sons and daughters of God, who sent his only begotten Son into our world as one of us, to remind us of our dignity, our delight, and our freedom as human beings made in the image and likeness of God. This is our glory. This is what we celebrate. Remember who you are. Remember who God is. Remember, in the Word made flesh, God is one of us. We are spiritual beings on a human journey, said Teilhard de Chardin.